Good afternoon, everyone. We had a bit of technical difficulty first time out. So we're going to start the third chapter again, the third chapter of Blessings in Disguise. Published by Guideposts. It's the first book in the Sugar Creek Amish Mysteries. Cheryl, our heroine, had just heard someone say, while she was in the corn maze, "No, I haven't found her yet, Arch, but I will, and when I do, I'm going to kill her." Horrified by what she had heard, Cheryl began to hurry through the maze, trying to locate the way out, but she couldn't find the exit. Turn after turn led her nowhere. Finally, out of frustration, she pushed through the corn, breaking some of the stalks. She felt one of the damaged stalks scrape her ankle, and she cried out in pain. Not taking time to see how badly she was injured, she quickly turned around, trying to get her bearings. She was on the far side of the maze, not as close to the Swiss Miss as she'd hoped. Not knowing what else to do, she hurriedly walked toward the sidewalk, joining a group of tourists taking pictures of the quaint downtown area. Although she glanced back towards the maze several times, she didn't see anyone coming out. When the group reached the sidewalk in front of the Swiss Miss, Cheryl broke away and limped toward the store, trying to keep an even pace so as to not draw attention to herself. As she entered the shop, she found Esther talking to a customer about the different kinds of Amish cheeses kept in the store's small cooler. When she noticed Cheryl, her eyes widened. "You all right?" she asked. Cheryl, embarrassed by her unkempt appearance, nodded and made a beeline for her office. Her hair had caught on some of the corn stalks as she ran out, and her coat was dirty. Even though she couldn't see herself, she was certain she looked a sight. Thankfully, there was a small half bathroom connected to the office where she could clean up. As soon as she closed the bathroom door, she noticed the blood on her shoe. She washed her face and ran her hands through her hair, trying to dislodge pieces of cornstalk. Then she grabbed some paper towels, ran one of them under the water, and went back into her office. She'd just taken off her coat and had plopped down in her chair when the door to her office swung open and Esther came in. "Ah, you have hurt yourself, Cheryl. What happened?" "I went through the corn maze next door and cut myself on a broken stalk." She pulled up her pant leg, and the women stared at a pretty good-sized gash on her ankle. Esther came over and gently took the paper towels from her employer. Then she knelt down next to Cheryl and carefully cleaned the wound. "Do you have any antiseptic?" she asked. "There's some hydrogen peroxide under the sink," Cheryl said. "Aunt Mitzi told me to always keep some handy in case someone needed it." While Esther went to get the peroxide, Cheryl tried to figure out what to do next. She was beginning to wonder if the man in the maze was really serious. A lot of people used the phrase, "I'm going to kill you," but they didn't mean they were actually going to murder someone. If she contacted the police and it was an offhand, careless remark, was she overreacting? "Here we go," Esther said as she stepped back into the room. "Your aunt is a very wise woman, yeah? She has provided everything we need to tend to your injury." Cheryl managed a weak smile. "Yes, she is very wise. Sometimes I feel she's still here, watching over me. I'll need something and it will just suddenly show up. God provides for those who love us. Ain't so?" Cheryl nodded. "Yes, he does." "Esther, I'm afraid I caused some damage to Gleason's maze. I may have ruined some of their stocks." The girl replied, "I would not worry about Mr. Gleason. He will probably just pick up the broken pieces and tie them to the stakes. He does not take very good care of his maze." Cheryl looked at her in surprise. It was the first time she'd heard Esther say anything, even vaguely negative, about another person. Esther caught Cheryl looking at her and she blushed. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I should not have spoken so." "I'm sure you didn't say anything that isn't true." "That may be, but it is not my place to judge." She put a large bandage on Cheryl's cut and then stood up. "You must come to our farm and visit our maze. You will find it very different." I appreciate the offer, Cheryl said slowly, but I got a little panicked. Maybe corn mazes aren't for me. Esther frowned at her. Why would you panic in a maze? Your map should show you the way. Map? I didn't have a map. She sighed. You should have been given a map. A corn maze should be fun, not frightening. Cheryl explained to her that no one was there when she entered. There may have been some maps at the entrance. I just didn't see them. Or perhaps it was too much trouble to. Cheryl stopped, or Esther stomped her foot. There I go again. Maybe Rumspringa is having a bad effect on me. Cheryl pulled her pant leg down. Her ankle hurt and felt stiff. If you don't want to be involved in Rumspringa, Esther, why not withdraw? Esther looked away for a moment before saying, Lydia tells me I should be certain about being baptized into the church. I do not want to make a mistake. Cheryl remembered a question Aunt Mitzi had asked her more than once. What does your heart tell you, Esther? Esther's dark brown eyes filled with tears. I love my life and my family. I am not saying other ways of living are wrong, but I do not think I want a life away from what I know. It is very hard. Cheryl reached out and took the girl's hand. I believe you'll make the right choice when the time comes. Follow God, Esther, and don't let Lydia talk you into something that isn't right for you. But we have been best friends since we were little girls. I do not want to lose her. Cheryl squeezed Esther's hand and let it go. Be honest with her. Tell her you have doubts. You may find she's feeling exactly the same way. She smiled at Esther. I'm sure Lydia doesn't want to lose you either. Esther wiped away a tear that snaked down her cheek. Your words make good sense. She gave Cheryl a hug. Thank you. The bell over the front door rang. Esther wiped her face with her apron and hurried out front to greet whoever had entered. Cheryl sat back down in her chair, still thinking about the incident in the maze while trying to concentrate on the paperwork that awaited her. About an hour later, Esther informed her that a tour bus had pulled up out across the street and was unloading passengers intent on exploring the wonders of Sugar Creek. When the buses showed up, things got very busy as scores of excited tourists invaded the downtown stores. Many of the bus riders headed to the Swiss Miss, while some of them made a beeline to the Sugar Creek Sisters quilt shop. A few older women went straight to the fruit and produce stand set up in front of the Christian bookstore. Fall apples and pears were a hit, but the big sellers right now were okra and pumpkins. Cheryl watched as the women bought large bags of organic fruit and vegetables. When they had all they could carry, they lugged their treasures over to the bus driver, who stowed them away so the women could continue their shopping. Cheryl noticed the bus driver with Annie's Amish tours wasn't the same one she'd seen before and wondered if he was new or just filling in. After securing the women's bounty in a large compartment on the side of the bus, he leaned against the bus and lit a cigarette. Cheryl had the strangest feeling he was watching the store, and it gave her an uneasy feeling. She became too busy to pay any attention to him as she helped customers with their purchases. Cheryl sold all the jams and jellies Naomi had just delivered. Eventually, customers thinned and the bus took off for the next exciting spot on their tour. As they drove away, a buggy pulled up outside the front door, and Cheryl watched as Naomi climbed down. Is it 3:00 already? Cheryl said, looking at her watch. The afternoon had flown by. Yeah? It does not feel that late to me either, Esther said. She quickly began to straighten some of the shelves left in disarray by careless customers who didn't bother to put items back neatly after looking at them. Cheryl walked over to the door and greeted Naomi as she came inside. Levi is busy at the farm, so I came to pick Esther up, she said. I'm glad you're here. Can I talk to you for a minute? Of course, Naomi said with a gracious smile. Esther, will you work just a little longer while I talk to your mother? Yeah, I would be happy to. Cheryl motioned to Naomi to follow her into the office. Once both women were inside, Cheryl closed the door. She pointed at a chair in front of her desk. Have a seat. I'll try not to keep you too long. Naomi shook her head. I have time for you. Do not worry. Her smile slipped a little. I hope you are not having problems with Esther. Cheryl shook her head as she sat down in her desk chair. Oh my goodness, no. She's wonderful. That's not it at all. Then what can I do for you? I need your advice. Something happened. She proceeded to tell Naomi about the incident in the maze. By the time she finished, Naomi had a troubled look on her face. So someone's life has been threatened. Should you not contact the police? I'm not sure. I know you would never make a comment like that, the one I mentioned, but people in the world sometimes use it as a way to express frustration. It doesn't mean they really intend to kill anyone. I'm new in Sugar Creek, Naomi. If I contact the police chief and turn out to be wrong, Naomi's expression made it clear the man's words had stunned her gentle, loving sensibilities. Finally, she shook her head. It is difficult to understand the ways of the world sometimes, but I am certain you will make the right decision. Cheryl smiled at her Amish friend. Thank you for listening. It's nice to have someone to talk to. Naomi nodded slowly. You know, when I first got to know your aunt, I did not believe I could ever be close to an Englisher. Do not misunderstand. We have contact with many in our community who do not believe the way we do. But these relationships come from activities at our farm or from the sale of our produce. However, your aunt showed me that people who love God are not so different. To my surprise, Mitzi became my dear friend, and I hope we will become dear friends as well. Cheryl returned the smile. I thought we already were. Naomi blushed slightly. I believe you are right. Please let me know what happens with this situation. I would not worry. God is watching over you. Cheryl stood to her feet, her ankle sending a twinge to remind her of her injury. Naomi, did you remember to ask Levi about the note? Yeah, she said. He's been looking for his Bible, and I guessed he accidentally left it here when he made his delivery. But he knows nothing about the note and could not guess where it came from. Maybe someone put it inside the Bible while it was in the shop, Cheryl said. Guess I can just add it to the other mysterious things going on at the Swiss Miss. I'm sorry you are distressed, Naomi said. I will pray for you. Thank you. It seems I need it. There was a knock at the door before it slowly swung open. I'm sorry to interrupt, Esther said, but I'm supposed to meet Lydia in a few minutes. We are going to the bookstore. Cheryl tried to hide a smile. Many Amish young people love to read, especially the so-called bonnet books that centered around their simple community. Although reading fiction wasn't forbidden under the community's ordnung, a set of rules and regulations specifically in place for each local district, many of the older people found it hard to understand why their children weren't content with just reading the Bible. Naomi was very sympathetic with Esther's love of literature, but having been raised on the Bible and a few religious books approved by their church, she had told Cheryl that Esther and Lydia's interests were a little difficult for her to accept. Naomi frowned at her daughter. Another book? Esther grinned. Yeah, ma'am. Another book. You should not worry about me so. I'm careful in what I read. Naomi sniffed. A mother is a gardener of God, tending to the hearts of her children. Cheryl recognized the Amish proverb Naomi quoted. Aunt Mitzi had grown to love the wisdom of these proverbs. In fact, she had several samplers in her house with some of her favorite sayings. Not missing a beat, Esther shot back, yeah? And good character, like good soup, is usually homemade. She smiled at her mother. You and Dad have given me good character. I hope you trust this is true. Naomi sighed deeply. You push my patience, Esther. Buy your book. I need to visit with the Yoders about an order. Then I will come by the bookstore to pick you up. Esther laughed and then came over to give her mother a big hug. I love you, ma'am. Naomi's lips twitched in a smile. I love you too. Now off with you. Do not dawdle. You know your dad likes his supper served on time. After catching a quick grin at Cheryl, Esther left the office. The women heard the bell over the front door ring as she left. She is a wonderful girl, Cheryl said softly. Naomi nodded. Yeah, I know this is true. I trust she will continue to make good choices and follow God's way. Naomi's words were positive, but Cheryl could see the concern on her face. I'm sure she will. I must be on my way as well, Naomi said. I will be praying for you and for the woman who is the recipient of so much anger. And I will also pray for the man so full of rage. He must be very unhappy. Cheryl wasn't surprised at Naomi's response. This was the Amish way, forgiveness toward everyone. But she did feel some slight conviction since her attitude toward the man in the maze weren't quite so magnanimous. As she walked Naomi to the door, she asked, Did you happen to mention my interest in the Bible covers to Levi? Naomi stopped and looked at her strangely. Yeah, and he seemed to consider it. I am surprised since he was so against the idea when Mitzi addressed it. Levi said he will speak to you soon about the possibility. You have not yet seen our farm. Would you like to have dinner with us tomorrow night? You could talk with him then. Cheryl smiled. I would love it. Thank you, Naomi. The Amish woman nodded, a look of satisfaction on her face. Can you be at our house at 6 o'clock? Yes, I look forward to it. Good. With one last smile, Naomi went out to her buggy, got inside, and drove away. Cheryl worked until 5 o'clock, closed the store, and headed home. As she walked, she kept looking behind her. Even though she didn't notice anything unusual, she had the strange feeling that she was being watched. And that, my friends, is it for this week. Stay tuned. Next week, we'll find out what happens at the farm.